There are moments when life suddenly becomes very quiet. Maybe you are sitting alone in your car after a long day. Maybe you are lying awake in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling. Maybe you are in a room full of people, but inwardly, something feels strangely separate. Nothing dramatic has happened. And yet for a few seconds, the ordinary world becomes unfamiliar. You are breathing, you are hearing sounds. You are seeing the room, the light, the movement of thoughts, the rising and fading of emotion. And somewhere inside all of that, there seems to be someone here. Someone who is breathing, someone who is hearing, someone who is seeing, someone who is thinking, someone who is feeling, someone who is here, receiving all of this. That someone is so familiar that we almost never question it. We call it me, we call it I. But if we stop for a moment and ask, honestly, what is this I? Where is it? What does it actually look like? Then something very strange begins to happen. The most familiar thing in our life becomes the hardest thing to find. We can point to the body, we can point to the face in the mirror, we can point to thoughts, memories, emotions, preferences, fears, desires, roles, and personal history. But when we look for the one who owns all of it, the one who seems to be behind the whole experience, it becomes difficult to locate. It does not appear to be simply inside the head, even though we often feel as if thinking happens from there. It does not appear to be inside the heart, even though we often speak as if feeling comes from there. It cannot be reduced to the body, because the body itself is something being experienced. It cannot be reduced to thought, because thoughts arise and pass away, while the sense of being me seems to remain. And yet, we cannot deny that something is present. Every experience seems to happen from somewhere. Not in a physical sense only, but inwardly. There is a sense that this breath is my breath. This pain is my pain. This memory belongs to me. This fear is happening to me. This life, with all its weight and intimacy, is not happening in general. It is happening here. This here is the beginning of the whole matter. Before we can understand the self, we have to understand this subtle feeling of here. There is a very basic recognition within ordinary life. It usually does not appear as a clear thought. Most of the time, it is not spoken. It is simply built into the way experience feels. There is a sense of a separate existence here, a sense that this region of life is different from that region of life. This body is here, that body is there. This pain is mine, that pain is yours. This memory belongs to this life, that memory belongs to another. This stream of feeling, perception, and response is taking place as me. From the vastness of existence, one particular field is felt as here, as mine, as this life. That field of separate existence is what we usually call the ego. But here, ego does not mean arrogance. It does not mean selfishness. It does not mean pride, vanity, or the need to feel superior. Those are only surface expressions of ego. At a deeper level, ego is simply the sense of a distinct field of existence. It is the feeling that life is being lived from a particular boundary, through a particular history, with a particular set of memories, fears, desires, wounds, roles, and images. This field has content. It contains childhood memories, personal stories, names, relationships, ambitions, disappointments, beliefs, habits, emotional patterns, and the image we have learned to carry of ourselves. None of this appears out of nowhere. It is built through experience after experience, through the way we were seen, the way we were hurt, the way we were loved, the way we protected ourselves, the way we succeeded, failed, hoped, lost, and adapted. Over time, all of that becomes organized into a familiar inner world. And that familiar inner world is what we usually call myself. But the ego does not always have the same size. Sometimes, the strongest feeling is simply, I am this individual person, this body, this name, this story, this private life, these problems, these desires, these fears. At other times, the personal boundary softens a little. We feel ourselves as part of something larger, a family, a community, a generation, a country, a movement, humanity itself. And in rare moments, even those familiar layers may grow quiet. The personal story may fade into the background, And what remains is a simple sense of being alive, open, present, not so tightly divided from everything else. But even when the field becomes wider, there is still a subtle sense of here. The boundary may be narrow or broad. It may feel like a small room, or it may feel as wide as the sky. But as long as existence is still being felt from a distinct here, the basic structure of ego remains. This is important. Ego is not only the small, defensive, selfish personality. Ego is the structure of felt separation itself. It is the way the vastness of life becomes gathered into a particular field and felt as this side of experience. Now we come to the strange part. The ego itself does not usually appear as one direct experience. It is more like the background field. What appears directly are moments. A sound arises, a thought appears, a feeling moves through the chest, a memory opens, a fear tightens the body, a face appears before the eyes, a word is heard, a sentence is read. In each moment, the whole field of separate existence does not appear evenly. It gathers, it narrows. It condenses around what is happening now. When anger rises, the field condenses around anger. When sadness comes, the field condenses around sadness. When pleasure appears, the field condenses around pleasure. When a thought says, "I am not enough," the field gathers around that thought until it feels like the center of life. This condensation is what we call experience. Experience is not just an object appearing before a neutral observer. Experience is the field of life gathering itself into a direct point of contact. Something is happening, and it is not merely happening somewhere out there. It is being felt from here. This is why experience feels so intimate. A thought is not just a thought, it is my thought. Pain is not just pain, it is my pain. A memory is not just an image, it feels like a piece of my life returning. At the point where the field condenses into direct experience, something else appears with it. A center, a felt center, a sense that this is happening to someone. That center is what we call the self. The self is the center effect that appears inside experience. It is not a separate being standing behind experience, controlling it, owning it, watching it from a distance, or creating it from some hidden room inside the mind. It feels that way. That is the power of the illusion. But when we look carefully, the self appears together with experience. It does not come first, then produce experience. It is not the cause. It is an effect. This point deserves to be heard slowly. The self is an effect, not the source. It arises with the immediacy of experience, the way a shadow appears when light meets an object. The shadow is not the object. The shadow does not exist before the light touches the object. The shadow does not secretly control the object. And yet, the shadow is not nothing. It is visible. It has shape. It can affect what we see. In the same way, the self is not an independent entity, separate from experience. But it is also not simply unreal in the ordinary sense. It is real as an effect. It is present, vivid, and often extremely convincing. When there is fear, there is a frightened self. When there is anger, there is an offended self. When there is longing, there is a self that feels incomplete. When there is love, there is a self that opens. When there is silence, there may be a self that feels peaceful, or a self that tries to possess the silence. The self changes with the experience because it is shaped by the experience. Not because there are many separate selves hidden inside us, but because each experience produces its own center effect. This is why searching for the self becomes so difficult. If we search for the self as if it were an object, we will not find it. We may find thoughts about ourselves. We may find sensations in the body. We may find images, stories, emotional contractions, memories, and beliefs. But we will not find a solid little owner sitting behind everything. No fixed point, no shape, no final location, no inner object called me. And yet, while we are searching, the self is still present. It is present as the center effect of the searching itself. There is a sense of someone who is looking, someone who wants to understand, someone who may succeed or fail, someone who may finally discover the truth. This is what some contemplative traditions mean when they say that the seeker and the sought are not two separate things, not as a mystical slogan, but in a very precise way. The self that is being searched for appears as the very center of the search. It is not standing behind the search. It is arising as the feeling of the one who searches. And this is why the self cannot be captured in the way the mind wants to capture it. The hand cannot grasp itself as an object without creating another position from which it seems to grasp. The eye cannot see itself directly as an object, except through reflection. The self cannot be found as a thing because it is the center effect of the act of finding. At this point, a natural question appears. If the self is only an effect inside experience, why does it feel continuous? Why do we feel that the I of yesterday, the I of today, and the I of tomorrow are one long thread moving through time? Why does it feel as if one person has been here since childhood, passing through every event, carrying the same hidden center all the way into this present moment? To understand this, we have to look at memory. The self only appears directly now. Even a memory of the past is not happening in the past. It is appearing now. A picture of childhood, a regret, a wound, a moment of pride, a face we loved, a mistake we still carry. All of these appear as present experience. The future is the same. A hope, a plan, an anxiety, an imagined version of what may happen. All of it appears now. Even the feeling that I have been here for many years is a feeling appearing now. This does not mean the past never happened. It means that the felt continuity of I is constructed in the present through memory, emotion, habit, and projection. Each experience leaves a trace, a kind of ink mark, and each trace carries the color of the self that appeared in that moment. The child who was afraid, the teenager who wanted to be seen, the adult who learned to control, the lover who opened, the wounded one who withdrew, the one who succeeded, the one who failed, the one who kept going. These traces gather in the field of ego, and when consciousness touches them again, it recognizes a familiar flavor. This was me. This is my story. This is the life I have lived. The mind connects the traces into a line, and that line feels like a continuous I. But the continuity is not the movement of a fixed entity through time. It is the continuity of traces, memory, emotional tone, bodily habit, and recognition. It is the way the past is carried as color inside the present. If the self is an effect, not a solid entity, then something begins to soften. We do not have to defend the self as if it were an eternal object that could be destroyed by criticism, failure, loss, or change. And we do not have to deny the self as if spiritual life required us to pretend that no one is hurting, no one is afraid, no one is loving, no one is living this life. Both extremes miss the subtlety. The self is not absolutely real as an independent thing, but it is real as experience. When pain is present, the self that feels pain is experientially real. When joy is present, the self that laughs is real in that moment. When grief comes, the one who grieves is not an illusion to be dismissed. The question is not whether the self exists or does not exist in some abstract way. The question is, what kind of reality does it have? And this is the more accurate answer. The self is real as an effect of experience. It is not real as a separate, unchanging owner of experience. This distinction changes everything. Because if we believe the self is a fixed owner, then life becomes a constant project of protection. We defend the image. We defend the story. We defend the wound. We defend the role. We defend the version of ourselves that we think must survive. But if we see the self as a process, then the grip can begin to loosen. Not because we force it to loosen, not because we attack the self, but because we understand its nature more clearly. A flame is real. You can feel its heat. You can see its light. It can burn. It can warm. It can move. But the flame is not a fixed object that you can pick up and hold apart from the burning. It is a process. When the conditions are present, the flame appears. When the conditions change, the flame changes. When the process stops, the flame is gone. Nothing has been stolen. No object has been removed. The process has simply ended. The self is similar. When experience condenses in a certain way, the center effect appears. When the conditions shift, that center shifts. When the contraction dissolves, The self that depended on that contraction is no longer there in the same way. This is not annihilation. It is the ending of a process that once felt solid. None of this needs to become a belief. In fact, if it becomes only another belief, it may simply become one more layer of ego, a spiritual image, a more refined identity. Someone who now believes, I understand the self. That is not the point. The invitation is much simpler. Look, in ordinary moments, look. When someone criticizes you, notice how quickly a center forms. When praise comes, notice the one who expands around it. When fear enters, notice how the whole field tightens into the one who may lose something. When desire appears, notice how the future gathers around the one who wants. When sadness comes, notice the self that seems to be made of the sadness. Do not rush to destroy it. Do not rush to transcend it. Do not even rush to call it illusion. Just observe the way it appears. Observe how the ego provides the field, and how the self appears as the center effect of each experience. Observe how the one you thought was standing behind life is actually arising within life, moment by moment. This is the first step, not the final realization, not the end of the journey, only the beginning of seeing clearly. And when this is seen, even a little, something in our relationship with life begins to change. We no longer stand in experience quite the same way. We begin to sense that the one we have been defending so intensely is not a solid owner hidden behind the world. It is a movement, a formation, a center that appears and fades within the living field of experience. And perhaps, in seeing this, there is a little more space, not distance from life, but space inside life. Enough space to breathe without immediately becoming the one who must control the breath. Enough space to feel pain without turning it into a permanent identity. Enough space to let a thought pass without needing it to define who we are. Enough space to live this human life fully, intimately, honestly, while no longer being completely imprisoned by the center that appears within it. That is where the inquiry begins. Not by rejecting the I, not by worshiping it, but by seeing it, clearly, gently, directly, as it appears.